When did your something is very wrong here gut instinct turn out to be right? I was walking home and a woman approached me to ask for directions. I told her how to get where she wanted to go, but she didn't walk that way, but instead walked beside me and kept pace with me. This made me incredibly uncomfortable, so I said, "Have a nice day," and doubled my speed, not running, but outpacing her significantly. A moment later, I heard running footsteps. I must have instinctively gripped my purse strap because I held onto it as she ran by and tried to snatch it. We ended up tussling for a moment. I shouted very loudly, "Help! She's stealing my purse." Neighbors came outside, causing her to walk away. She did not get my purse. My friend asked me if I wanted to go out to the woods with him and explore abandoned places. He even specifically mentioned that he'll bring a firearm to keep us safe. My alarm bells were fucking ringing. I asked him a couple questions, I don't know what, but concluded that it was sketchy as fuck. My gut told me not to go, so I exited from the conversation while he went asking others the same question. Fast forward a couple years, I heard that he was in prison. I was stunned, but remembered the memory when he asked me if I wanted to go into the woods. Turns out he took a freshman, him being senior at that time, and kept his promise of looking for abandoned places. He found a cabin in the woods, brought his friend inside, and as soon as his friend turned his back, bam, knocked dead. He shot him in the back of the head. I reminisce on this quite often and think, what if I had agreed? Every time I think of this, I'm very grateful I'm alive. Driving with a friend of mine through a pretty remote forest road. Couple of guys in the middle of nowhere tried flagging us down. I almost stopped for them before an alarm went off in my head and I stepped on the gas. My friend started saying what the foo, and at the same time there was a shot and a bullet hit the back of the car. We made it to a police station. Turns out there had been a bunch of people and vehicles going missing in the area that same week. Freshman year of college, a friend and I were driving across town and he stopped for gas. It wasn't a dangerous part of town or anything, just a quiet gas station with an old book out front. But this feeling came over me that we needed to get out of there. I tried to shake the feeling by making a joke. "This feels like somewhere an axe murderer would hide out." My friend immediately gunned it out of there without filling up. He said he had the same feeling and me bringing it up too scared the shit out of him. On the way home there were about 20 police cars outside. It turns out some guy shot 2 people in a carjacking and robbery. The book was the car he stole. I stopped off at a dollar store to get last minute stuff for my niece's birthday party, foil or napkins or something. I went to the one I had never been to, in a seedy part of town. There weren't many other people there, since it was a Sunday afternoon. A luxury car pulls up, and this gorgeous man gets out and starts trying to catch my eye, like he wanted to ask directions. Dream come true, right? Except my gut started screaming run for no reason. I pretended I didn't see him and got in my car and left. The next morning I see on the news that 3 people were murdered in Charleston. They were all connected to one dude. One of their cars was stolen and the serial killer was on the loose heading west through my area. Guess who the suspect was? Yep, the dude I'd seen. They arrested him after he'd kidnapped a girl in August of the same night I saw him, and she managed to escape. Still gives me goosebumps. What if I'd stopped and talked to him? In high school I came home early one Friday evening to find that my house just felt off. It's so hard to describe, but the feeling I got walking into my living room just immediately had me on alert and didn't feel right. I walked into the kitchen to find a half-eaten burger from McDonald's, which I found strange. Called out to my parents, got no response. Called them on their cell, got no answer. 30 minutes later my brother called to tell me that my dad had a heart attack and to get to the hospital. Thankfully it turned out okay, but my gut quite literally knew something bad had happened the moment I stepped in the front door. Went out for beers with some friends. Guy at the bar kept staring at my female friend. Didn't think nothing of it. Initially thought maybe he is just into her. Alarm bells start ringing for some reason. Minutes later he went to my friend, then saw him try to slip something in her drink while she was talking to another friend of ours. Good thing I was watching. Told him to fuck off with that roofie shit. He tried to punch me but missed. Bouncer saw. He got kicked out. Funniest part was that when we met up with a mate of mine from uni that night, he was beating ass for doing the same thing to his GF. Watch your drink, lads. I went to this acquaintance's 35th birthday party. There are 4 people in the living room. When we get there, there's this young looking girl with this guy in his 30s. Odd, but they seemed very coupley and the host is unfazed, so I guess she just looks young for her age. The host sends us to the basement where the party's in full swing. They've got someone DJing and a cool light set up and people dancing, so we start dancing too. After a few minutes we start looking around at our surroundings a little more. We are surrounded by 13-year-olds. Everyone in our group realized it at the same time and we all locked eyes and noped out of there. Cops were arriving as we were leaving. I've always been prone to gut feelings, but my mum's takes the cake. She went to a boarding school and ended up leaving her senior year, but her 2 best friends still went there. They all lived in similar areas for summer and my mom wanted to go back and see everyone towards the end of summer break when she was 17. All 3 girls, including my mom, were going to take a train to a nearby station and meet up there and take a taxi to the school. My mom got to our home train station and got hysterical, which she never does, and told her mom she has a horrible feeling and doesn't want to go. Her mom told her to absolutely not go, and they went home. Later on that night, they got a call that the 2 girls who went were in a car accident with a drunk taxi driver on the way to the school. My mom's most best friend in the world was thrown from the car and decapitated. The other girl was so severely injured that she was more or less a vegetable and paralyzed from the neck down. She lived about another decade unable to speak or move and then passed away in a home. My mom has been through the ringer in life, but this has always made her tell me to always follow my gut feeling. She said she never had a gut feeling when she was a teen, and this was the only time she ever did. She was looking forward to this trip for months, but that feeling was enough to make her back out right when she was boarding the train. My mom is so strong, and I'm not sure why this happened, but I'm thankful for whatever power allowed my mother to be okay. So I had a friend who I slowly had a worse relationship with as the years went on. I threw a party at my house and my invitation's very specific. I was in one of the phases where we had a recent argument and I didn't want to talk to him. He shows up at the party. I noticed him, but my dumb brain decided, oh, I must have invited him without thinking. We party for a few hours, then everybody starts leaving. Before we leave, however, that friend tells me to come to the basement. My basement isn't exactly one of those hangout basements. No, it's a stone underground room full of cracks and a sewage drain. Alarms go off in my head because I knew how mad and vengeful he could get, and he was pretty upset after the argument. I tell him in a second I need to change. There's still 1 or 2 guests in the house luckily. I go to my room and text one of the guests about the situation. He tells me to walk the dog then. When we go outside, me and the dog go into the car and I stay the night at his house. Before I leave the next morning I call the police and they check the house before I go in. To my horror they come out with my friend detained. Later they told me he was hiding in the basement with a knife waiting for me. It gives me chills to this day thinking about him. I love my stepsister to pieces, but she is way too trusting with people she doesn't know well. About 10 years ago she was living with a couple of roommates who became her best friends. She would tell me stories about them over the phone. We lived in different cities and I would just think, Jesus Christ, these girls are messes. She could hear the wariness in my voice after telling me stories about their troubled lives and how they're really good people who have just been through a lot. I didn't buy it. I can't think of all the stories because it's been too long, but they were always sketchy as hell. Cut to my stepsister inheriting 20k from a deceased relative. She was young and super excited about it, and I knew she probably didn't keep the new money a secret. About 1 fucking week later, one of her roommates calls her panicking, saying that this guy who she's been talking to online kidnapped her and was holding her for ransom. A 15k ransom. And she called my stepsister for the ransom. Not her parents. Her fucking roommate. She calls me, freaking out because she didn't know what to do. I asked her if she had told her roommate about the money. Of course she did. Move out. Seize. Gtfo. Those little girls who are really good people, but have just been through a lot. Yeah, they're liars. She reluctantly followed my advice and thankfully didn't try to make a deal with them. I told her to call the police. If I remember correctly, she didn't. She still worries me sometimes. I got really creepy vibes from one of my friend's older brothers despite him being an otherwise perfectly pleasant person to be around and popular among my friends. At first he was just someone who was around from time to time and we all exchanged small talk if our paths crossed. Then he started hanging out every now and then and eventually insinuated himself into our friend group. It was a relative large group of friends ranging in age from 20-ish on the older end of the spectrum to some younger kids who were still in high school. The older brother in question was 24. As he started coming around more and more, something felt off to me. He seemed like a pretty chill, likable guy who had a good job and life prospects, but it had me wondering why he didn't have any friends his own age. I'm 25 now, and the last thing I want to do with my time is run around with a group of teenagers. He was our hookup for alcohol, though, so everyone wanted to keep him around. At one point we were all over at another friend's house for a party celebrating his and his little sister's birthday, which was on the same day. My friend was turning 19 and his little sister was turning 16. At one point a group of us migrated in her room to drink and watch a movie, and lo and behold, my friend's creepy older brother was there. People got progressively drunker and began talking over the movie to the point it wasn't watchable. I was sober and losing patience, so I got up to leave. As I got up to leave, the little sister asked if anyone wanted to cuddle with her, and the creepy 24-year-old older brother volunteered himself. While I wish I could say I spoke up, I just left. I later heard they hooked up and then found out that he had been shamelessly hitting on every girl in the friend group, all of whom were either barely 18 or still underaged. Similar to how I just left her room without saying anything, I didn't make an issue out of it thinking no one would care. He never got in trouble or was formally excommunicated from the group. He just kind of drifted away. But every time it comes up, now that we are all older and have more life experience, we talk about how insane it was we didn't see the obvious red flags.